Hello and welcome to our telesummit and podcast series on preventing cancer. I'm your host, Jenny LaMorgan, owner of greenwomanstore.com, where we enjoy creating educational tools like this podcast series important to us, on topics important to us as women. I'm excited to be here with our guest, Ellen Connett, Managing Director of the Fluoride Action Network. Ellen is going to talk to us about the preponderance of evidence of fluoride's effect on human health and how and why we have fluoride in our water today. This telesummit is about our health, it's about politics, what we know and what we need to know about cancer, and preventing cancer and its recurrence. It's about medical practices, our environment, and our science. We've invited women experts whose passion it is to educate and encourage other women toward health and political action. So let me introduce you to our guest. Ellen Connett is Managing Director of the Fluoride Action Network. She has over 20 years' experience researching environmental toxins. The Fluoride Action Network, FAN, seeks to broaden awareness about toxicity of fluoride among citizens, scientists, and policymakers. The Fluoride Action Network has 53,000 members, and it remains vigilant in monitoring government agency actions that impact our exposure to fluoride. Welcome, Ellen Connett, and thank you so very much for your many years of researching environmental toxins.
Well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you for doing this. Our future lies in being able to educate ourselves and others for a better future. So doubly thank you for doing what you're doing.
I agree with you. I think education is such a foundation, for our health and our lifestyles and so much. And there's so much education that isn't available to us in our daily lives. So so grateful. How did you become interested in this line of research?
Well, my husband and I met as activists, and it seems like we've never stopped getting involved in issues. But on the fluoride issue, it was in 1996 while I was living in Canton, New York, when a dear friend of mine, Georgina Hull, urged me to become involved in the discussion of whether our little village should continue to fluoridate our drinking water. And this was the very first time I learned that our water was fluoridated, and I had no idea what that meant. Even though I'm an American, I had my children in England, and fluoride was simply not an issue there. I thought my friend was crazy when she told me her concerns, as I simply, and this is truthfully, I couldn't believe that a university community like Canton would allow this. However, because she was so insistent, I did my homework, and I was able to get my hands on a number of fluoride reports and other materials, and I simply read everything. I wanted to prove to her that she was wrong. But when I read this one report, it was 1993, Toxicological Profile on Fluoride from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. They do all these tox profiles. I read that, and it convinced me there was a problem. They said that certain subsets of our population were more vulnerable to the toxicity of fluoride, such as the elderly and those with diabetes. That's when I became involved, as I did not think it was fair. So she got...
Wow, and that was in 1993.
Well, it was 1996. The report was a 1993 report.
Okay. Well, I think so many of us have that experience today when we talk to our friends about fluoride, and we all think because we have a FDA, we have protective agencies out there supposedly working for us, but yet we have fluoride in our water. So help us get acquainted with what fluoride is, where it comes from, and then we'll talk about fluoride and cancer.
Okay, great. Fluoride is created by the interaction of the element fluorine with other elements, such as hydrogen fluoride, sodium fluoride, potassium fluoride, etc. Fluorine is in the halogen family along with chlorine, bromine, and iodine. That's about as much of the science that I know. The National Research Council of the National Academies published a report in 2006, and it was a landmark report for the United States. It was on the toxicology of fluoride. And they clearly stated for the first time that fluoride is an endocrine disruptor. They also stated that fluorides have the ability to interfere with the functions of the brain. And also that fluoride has a significantly long half-life in our bodies, in our bones, estimated at 20 years, and it accumulates in our bones over our lifetime. A healthy person is expected to retain approximately 40 to 50% of the fluoride they are exposed to, and mainly in their bone. And the rest is excreted through our kidney. For older people whose kidneys are not as efficient as a young person, they will retain more fluoride. The report is excellent. It's free, and one can read it online. There are several other large groups in the U.S. that require special consideration due to their above-average fluoride exposures. Water consumptions, what we drink, varies considerably among individuals by a factor of 10. Depends on our age, activity level, the presence of certain health conditions such as diabetes. While water companies can control the level of fluoride they put into the water, no one can control how much an individual drinks. And there are clearly some people who are consuming levels of fluoridated water that are considered unsafe. Infants have a very high fluid intake per body unit weight, such as infants who are formula fed with their formula is prepared with fluoridated tap water. They can receive up to 250 times more fluoride than the breastfed infant. Outdoor laborers working in hot climates, athletes, and some military personnel, they also exceed safe levels. Before I go any further, Jenny, I think there are 5 important points for women to know.
Okay.
In New York State, one of the first states in America that was fluoridated was in 1945 in Newburgh, New York. And Kingston, New York was used as the control non-fluoridated city. After 10 years, they compared results, and they published a report on it. And one of the findings was that the girls in fluoridated Newburgh menstruated 5 months earlier than the girls in the non-fluoridated city of Kingston. At the time, they said that was not significant. But when scientists hear that today, they say it is significant. So that was one of the findings. And I mentioned about the infant formula. This is very, very serious. Mother's breast milk has extremely low levels of fluoride. It's estimated to be at 0.004 part per million. Even when women drink high levels of fluoride in water, those levels in their breast milk don't change. So nature has some type of mechanism for protecting the infant from fluoride, but not when we purposely add it to our water and people give it to their babies. This is very wrong. It's very serious. No one knows what this means. They're getting estimated up to 250 times more fluoride than the breastfed infant. And another really striking thing is now there are 41 out of 48 published studies that report an association of fluoride exposure with reduced IQ in children. These studies come mainly from China and India. The lowest level that found an IQ reduction, the lowest level of fluoride in the water, was 1.3 parts per million. And in the United States, where approximately 70% of public water supplies are fluoridated, they're usually fluoridated at 1 part per million. So there's basically no margin of safety. at the time of the National Research Council report, which was in 2006, only 5 IQ studies were reviewed by them. Most of these other studies came after 2006, and FAN, Fluoride Action Network, was responsible for getting professional translations of the Chinese studies. And the other thing is risks of concern. The Centers for Disease Control states that 41% of children between the ages of 12 and 15 have some form of dental fluorosis. You've probably seen little white spots on teeth. Well, that's dental fluorosis, and that's in its very mild form. And it's due to overexposure to fluoride. And it only appears when the second teeth erupt. And then lastly, and this has to be of concern, because we fluoridate water to help poor children. And I don't think there's any sane person on our planet who doesn't want to help poor children in particular. They want to help them. No, everybody does, because it's wrong. But black children in America have higher rates of the more severe forms of dental fluorosis. We don't know why. Public health officials have known about this for over 50 years. They have done nothing to inform the affected communities. FAN just released a 1962 internal memorandum from a public health service official that stated, listen to this, quote, Negroes in Grand Rapids had twice as much fluorosis than others, unquote. And this is very serious. We don't know why black children are more susceptible. Also Mexican-American children, according to CDC also. But it really could be, this should be an environmental justice issue question. You know, no one, we're just not being educated on these issues. And lastly, we're exposed to fluoride from many sources, aside from our drinking water, which is probably our biggest exposure, because we use it to drink, we use it to cook, etc. We get exposure from toothpaste with fluoride, other dental products that contain fluoride, pesticides used on food, pharmaceuticals, industrial air pollution, and occupational exposures. We need to be concerned about those who live close to industrial fluoride-emitting facilities. I don't even know if they're informed, if they know that. So that's how we're exposed to fluoride, and a little bit about it.
Well, and why is fluoride added to our water? Do we need it? And does it occur naturally in our water?
Yes, it does occur naturally, but usually at very low levels. There are, however, areas in the world, particularly China and India, that have very high levels. And also in America, there are areas that have high levels of fluoride in the water. But generally speaking, they're low. And we put it in the water to help prevent tooth decay. It is the only substance used in water to treat people. It is not a nutrient, and because of that, it's worrisome that we are consuming so much of it. So, and do we need it? Well, 7% of Europe doesn't use it, and they have better teeth than we do. So, or maybe that's incorrect. Maybe not better, but as good as we are. You cannot tell the difference of who's fluoridated and who's not fluoridated looking at the condition of teeth. So one has to make up their own opinion on this, you know, whether we should fluoridate. But if you learn the issue, you might decide not to. That's what we have done, and that's our issue. Our mandate is to educate people.
Well, thank you for all your work, for sure. Let's talk about fluoride and cancer. What is the evidence and the causation in the research that you find, and what does it mean that fluoride is a mutagen? And that's usually defined as a compound that can cause genetic damage. So does that mean that fluoride is damaging our DNA?
Well, this is high politics. and no definitive answer is available. But this is what we know. A mutagen that you mentioned, it changes the genetic material and is likely a carcinogen. The preponderance of laboratory evidence indicates that fluoride can be mutagenic when present at sufficient concentrations. However, there are other studies that have found the opposite, but the preponderance of evidence says it is. And so I'm going to go through some of the big cancer tests. But first, this is of interesting, Jenny. The fluoridation chemicals that we use to fluoridate water, they come from the phosphate fertilizer industry. And according to the Environmental Protection Agency, these chemicals, known as hydrofluosilicic acid or silicofluoride, they break down to release the fluoride ion in the water. And these are industrial-grade chemicals that contain trace amounts of various heavy metals and radionuclides, because the phosphate rock mined to be a fertilizer is mined also for uranium. And the heavy metal of most concern from these contaminants is arsenic, because even though it is of a trace amount, it is a known human carcinogen. And because there are no safe levels to a human carcinogen, we don't know of any safe level that a human can be exposed to a carcinogen, we can safely say that using the byproducts of the phosphate fertilizer industry to fluoridate our water causes cancer, because these products contain arsenic. The only question is, how many cancers does it cause? So that's the first thing. The big cancer that fluoride is linked to is osteosarcoma, which is a common primary cancer of the bone and a main cancer of childhood, albeit it's rare. And it affects mainly boys. It is a cancer that commonly results in amputation of a limb and too often results in death. It has been estimated that 60 to 75% of all cases are in patients between 15 to 25 years of age. I'll start with what I had mentioned before, the Kingston-Newburgh study, the one where they began fluoridating Newburgh in 45. Well, another finding they found was a statistically significant increase in cortical defects in the bones of children in the fluoridated town of Newburgh. One researcher said he considered these cortical defects striking in terms of their similarity to osteosarcoma, but no follow-up was ever performed. The next important study was proposed in 1977 by the U.S. Congress. They mandated the National Toxicology Program to conduct animal studies to determine if fluoride causes cancer. Battelle Laboratories were contracted to perform the studies, and they began them in 1985. They ran for 2 years, and in 88, Battelle submitted their final report. And this included the finding of a small but statistically significant dose-related increase in osteosarcomas in male rats, but not in the female rats, and a dose-dependent increase of a rare liver cancer in male and female rodents. And the scientist who first described this very rare cancer in liver, he looked at the pathology from Battelle and said they were correct in their diagnosis. And then everything went crazy. What happened was this. There were other increases in oral and thyroid cancers, but they were not considered statistically significant. The politics that raged centered on the senior scientist in the Office of Drinking Water. His name was, and he's alive, William Marcus, because he expressed concerns about what he calls systematic downgrading of cancers in the published study, and requested that the EPA assemble an independent board of scientists to review the data produced in the study. And in a recent documentary done by David Kennedy, called Fluoride Gate, an American Tragedy, they go through this study. And this is what Marcus said. I printed out what he said because it was so. This is what he said. Rats got cancer of the bone, and they got a very unusual cancer of the liver, and that was extremely surprising. First of all, to produce cancer of the bone in rodents is never seen because the time that you have between birth and death of a rodent is only 3.5 to 4 years, and it usually takes longer than that to produce the cancer in a bone. And the cancer of the liver is extremely rare. And the fact that it happened meant that it was significant. This just doesn't happen. I wrote this memo in which I claimed that I thought fluoride was a carcinogen and that we had as much evidence with the animal studies to show that it was a carcinogen as we had with any of the other compounds that EPA studied and should be therefore treated as such. And when he said this, it was released. Somebody released this memo to the press, and all hell broke loose, basically, and he was fired. In this documentary, Fluoride Gate, they interviewed someone from the National Whistleblowers Association, and this is what he said about Marcus. He said they represented him in 2 trials against the EPA, and they won both of them. And the EPA was forced to pay Marcus's legal fees, his back pay, and an undisclosed sum for damages. And Stephen Cohn of the National Whistleblowers Association, he said this: I do not know why the agency, EPA, did what it did to Dr. Marcus, but I do represent whistleblowers, and I can tell you they went after Dr. Marcus with a vengeance. A vengeance. He was a board-certified toxicologist with years of seniority, the most respected toxicologist in the agency with an international reputation. When he wrote that memo, they went after him like he was an enemy of the state. They just hammered and hammered and hammered, and they went way over the line by destroying evidence and obstructing justice. And even after we won the first case where he was ordered, reinstated, they went after him again. And even though there were 2 court rulings finding retaliation, they never touched or disciplined those agency officials involved. This case marks a black mark on the EPA and raises fundamental issues about scientific freedom and about fluoride and why this agency went against one of its most respected scientists on that issue. I tell you, this documentary is absolutely riveting. And then what happened? While they won both cases, in 1994, Clinton was president, and his Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich, he upheld the decisions of the court. And he said that the true reason for the discharge was true retaliation. And Reich wrote that he found particularly disturbing that trumped-up charges against Marcus were accepted by his supervisors in the absence of any convincing documentation. The documentary is free. It's online at www.fluoridegate.org. It's really good, especially with the Marcus.
All right, we'll put a link.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, and so what happened then? So this is 1990, right? All heck's breaking loose, and then, 1994 he's reinstated. But in 1990, in response to the Marcus Memorandum, the American Council on Science and Health, known by its acronym ACSH, and industry's favorite nonprofit, held a press conference in D.C. in 1990. And they said they would seek to restrain any federal agency from banning or seeking to reclassify fluoride from a non-carcinogen to a probable carcinogen. And their defense of basically all industrial pollutants is legendary. That's why they're so beloved by industry. And then some National Cancer Institute researchers looked at the cancer registries for 1973 to 87, and they found an increase in osteosarcomas among young males, and mainly in fluoridated counties. However, they ruled out fluoridation as a risk factor. It was very unconvincing how they did it, but the paper was never published. It only appeared as an appendix in a public health service report. And then another study was undertaken by a fellow in the New Jersey Department of Health called Perry Cohn, who had a PhD. His report was published in 92, and what he did was he compared towns with fluoridation with the towns of residence of osteosarcoma cases at the time of diagnosis. And these were for cases between 79 and 87. And the most significant results he found came from a 3-county area had the greatest prevalence of fluoridation in the state. And the association with fluoridation was significant for boys aged 10 to 19. So he did that. And then another strange, well, maybe I'll come back to this. I don't even want to waste time on it. But, well, I'll say it because I said it. There was a woman called Kitty Gelberg, and she did a thesis on osteosarcoma in 1994. And then she published 2 subsequent papers on her thesis in 95 and 97. In all these documents, she states that the majority, 68% of her osteosarcoma cases were females, when in fact they were males. It's very difficult. No one understands how this could have gone through peer review. I mean, this is a significant mistake. She did find one thing, because it's males that are most affected, and she said 68% of her osteosarcoma cases were females.
But that wasn't true.
No. And so one of our people, our science person at FAN, Chris Newreth, he actually contacted Kitty Gelberg, and he said, "Is this not a mistake?" And she said, "Yes, it was." And so she acknowledged the mistake, but it was highly unusual. And
well, then, you said that fluoride is a hormone disruptor, and we're becoming more and more aware of that term, hormone disruptor. And that might, it sounds like it's the reason that these osteosarcomas are showing up more in boy children. And, there's something hormonally going on there that is, really
I know.
The boys.
Well, I'm coming to the most exciting paper of all that looks at that. This is really good. Well, one other thing what Gelberg did. She actually said in her thesis, which Chris read, and she found a connection, an association with dental X-rays to be significant with cases of osteosarcoma, but she didn't do anything with it in her published papers, and we don't know why. But anyway, so here's the good paper that's been published. And it was published by Elise Bassin and co-workers in 2006. It is the only published study to have looked at osteosarcoma in relation to sex-specific and age-specific exposure to fluoride in drinking water. She found a significant increased risk for young boys to osteosarcoma when they are exposed to fluoride in their 6th to 8th years. And according to Kathleen Thiessen, one of the best researchers on fluoride in the United States, this study indicates that similar studies of pediatric osteosarcoma that have not looked at age-dependent intake of fluoride cannot be considered to show no effect. And her study, this study has never been refuted. They tried with highly dirty tactics, but it's never succeeded. Her study stands. And here are some of the dirty politics and what happened after she published. Elise Bassin, the main author, she received her PhD in 2001 at Harvard. Her thesis advisor was a guy called Chester Douglas, a professor of dentistry at the Harvard School of Dental Medicine. He signed off on her thesis that found a strong association between fluoride exposure and osteosarcoma. Now, Douglas received a grant from the National Institute of Health to do a study on osteosarcoma from 1993 to 2004. Now, the curiosity is here is, one, he's a dentist to do a study on osteosarcoma on bone. Two, he was on record as being very, very pro-fluoridation. And three, during the time he did this study, he was the editor for Colgate-Palmolive's monthly newsletter to dentists, the professional newsletters for dentists. So this guy, and he's the guy that they selected to do the study on osteosarcoma. When Elise Basson published her paper in May 2006 in a publication called Cancer Causes and Control, which at that time was a Harvard-based publication, Douglas, her advisor, and another colleague, they had a letter in that same publication saying that Elise Basson's would be proved wrong, basically, because his largest study would dispute her findings. And this is like unheard of. Here we have a publication that produces this, riveting paper, and in the same issue has this letter from her former advisor saying, no, our larger study on osteosarcoma will discredit her findings. And he promised to get these findings out lickety-split. Well, the long and short of it, lickety-split was in 2011 when he published his paper, and it didn't dispute her at all because it couldn't. It was completely different. There was no way he could find a way to dispute her. But the dirty politics was this, that because of his letter, Elise Basson's paper was dismissed. They almost treated his letter as a published paper itself. It's absolutely shocking. Very, very bad. So her paper still stands. No one has been able to contradict it yet. It was a disgraceful incident for Chester Douglas particularly.
Wow. So we have some evidence of osteosarcomas being caused by fluoridation and certainly dental problems. Are there any other cancers that have been studied in connection with fluoride?
Yes, there was bladder cancer has been associated with bladder cancer. What else? There's oral health cancers, cancers of the mouth, and lung cancer has been associated. Different papers, but I think bladder and lung are the strongest associations where we have seen it. But still, things are not substantive enough for them to say that fluoride is a carcinogen. I think what they should have said is that fluoride is a probable carcinogen.
But they are saying that it's a hormone disruptor.
Absolutely, yes. It's
and we
an
know
endocrine
the hormone
disruptor.
disruptors, right? That we know that those cause cancer. So
yes,
so that,
and we learned that in 2006. There was one other little thing on the cancer. Some more dirty politics. You live in California, and you have a model program of the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act, which is known as Prop 65. That requires the publication each year of a list of chemicals known to the state to cause cancer or reproductive toxicity. This is really a model. I wish each of our states had this. I think you're the only state that has it. But in 2009, the California lead agency for Prop 65 requested public comments on its document, Evidence on the Carcinogenicity of Fluoride and its Salts. This is what they stated. Multiple lines of evidence appear to support several plausible hypotheses that fluoride is incorporated into bones, where it can stimulate cell division of osteoblasts, which are bone-forming cells, induce genetic changes, induce other cellular changes leading to malignant transformation, and alter cellular immune response, thereby increasing its carcinogenicity. Well, what happened there is they solicited public comments, and in the end, they actually did not. They said no. It was what they said. What did they say? There wasn't enough. They said the overall research was inconclusive, but they took into account Douglas's letter. The letter was only available. His published paper wasn't. And California came to this conclusion in like October 2011, the exact time when Douglas's paper was being published. So it was unfortunate. They did produce a good report in 2011 on the evidence that they got, called evidence on the carcinogen. But the interesting thing on politics was this. The California Dental Association, they stated in a newsletter they sent out that the American Dental Association gave them $200,000 to assist in the efforts to prevent the placement of fluoride on the list of chemicals known to cause cancer. Who would believe it? I mean,
well, there must be a lot of money made from the production of fluoride. I mean, what I had heard about fluoride was that it's actually a waste product.
Yes.
Of the
well, the fluoride that we use in fluoridation of the water supplies is a waste product from the fertilizer industry. I always used to believe that it was industry who was always trying to protect its chemicals. But what I learned way back a long time ago, it's just not industry wanting to protect chemicals. The government also wants to protect chemicals for their own interests. And it's very difficult to understand the root causes of the protection that's given fluoride. It's almost impossible to understand it.
Now, in addition to cancer and the fluoridosis, and are there other health effects from fluoride that have been studied, like our thyroids, for example?
Well, thyroid is something. In the National Research Council report, I think when they looked at the studies on fluoride's effect on the thyroid, that was the basis for why they said fluoride is an endocrine disruptor. That's why they came out with that statement. And so uterine cancer is another one that the Japanese feel is associated with fluoride.
Okay.
That's another women's issue.
Now, I've seen videos about the fast decline of horses exposed to a steady diet of fluorinated water. Can you speak to any studies that have been done on large or small animals?
Yes. Especially in the first part of the 20th century, up until maybe like 1960, 1970, damage to the bones of cows in pastures close to fluoride-emitting industries were well documented. Their bones were completely damaged. I mean, there's documentary evidence up to the kazoo on that. As to the horses, what brought this home was a woman named Kathy Justice, who lives in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and she had a number of horses. And what was highly unusual about Kathy living in Pagosa Springs is that she gave her horses town water, which was fluoridated. And horses consume tons of water, and her horses got terribly ill. Many of them died, and it was confirmed that the horses' problems were due to overexposure to fluoride. But it's unusual, on the other hand, for large animals, farm animals, to be on fluoridated water. Usually they're in the country and they're on their own well water. It's really too expensive. But the long and short of it, Pagosa Springs stopped fluoridating, and Kathy got her story out. But it's not very common. But yes, large animals animals who consume a lot of water should never drink fluoridated water. And only this month, this is a very touching story from India, is that the Times of India reported damage to the teeth and bones of lions in a particular area in India where there is a naturally high level of fluoride. Both the lions and humans are suffering. And what they said was many of the lions have lost teeth, and they noted that lions are not known to lose teeth in their lifetime. So they're now going to be looking at it. So it was very touching, to see that both the lions and the humans are suffering because of the high fluoride levels.
Yeah, I'm going to put in a plug for your newsletters because that's how I stay in touch with the fluoride issue. And what I really appreciate about your work is that it's an international coverage of fluoride and what's going on globally in regards to different countries that are banning fluoride, what states in the United States that are, what counties, what communities are fighting it. And it really keeps me, I really need that international news, and you really satisfy that need for me. So I really want to encourage listeners to sign up for your newsletter and just see the scope of this issue. It's a large issue, even though we don't hear about it. It's a large issue. It's a health issue, and it's something that we can very easily be educated about by signing up for your newsletter. So let's talk a little bit about fluoride supplementation. We hear about that now for to reduce tooth decay, and that just sounds to me like another pharmaceutical that's going to inhibit our health. Why would we do that? I think they're prescribed for children. Is that correct?
Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely madness. It's madness. And it's very wrong, Jenny. I'll tell you why. This practice should be stopped immediately. Fluoride, used as a supplement, in a supplement form, well, all fluoride is, according to the Food and Drug Administration, an unapproved drug. Now, I don't know if the teachers' union would allow teachers to give unapproved drugs to students, but that's what they're doing. I don't know if the Nursing Association would allow nurses, school nurses, to give unapproved drugs to children, but that's what they're doing. That's wrong. They do not inform the parents that, one, it's an unapproved drug, which means it's never been tested by the Food and Drug Administration. Never been tested. It's incredible, isn't it?
So these are being distributed in schools?
They are being distributed in schools where the community is not fluoridated. Not all schools do it. Many schools do. And actually a number of years ago in New York State, I don't know if it was the teacher who was giving them out or the school nurse, inadvertently gave all the children Ritalin instead of the fluoride supplements. And then they had to tell the parents, but they said, it won't cause any problems. It was only a one-off thing. But the whole thing is, that I shouldn't even have mentioned that. It was just so absurd. But I think if our communities are not, we've already banned the fluoride from our water supply. It's worth investigating whether or not they're handing these supplements out in the schools. Well, they do have to get some permission from the parents. So, they just can't give them without parents' permission.
All right. Well, that's good. And as we raise our awareness levels, then we have more information to give our permission or not. So all fluoride toothpaste now sold in the United States carries a poison warning, instructing users to contact the Poison Control Center if we swallow more than what's usually required in brushing our teeth. Is this because of the risks of fluoride come primarily from ingestion?
Absolutely.
That's the question. Okay.
Right. They put this label on in 1997, and actually I called them up. I called the FDA immediately. I heard that. And I went through a whole bunch of people. And they said, oh, they didn't know why. But before I called them up, I listed every single ingredient in toothpaste. So I had them on my desk. And they said, oh, I said, was this due to fluoride? And they said, no. I said, well, what was it due to? Well, and then I said, was it this ingredient? Was it this ingredient? Was it this ingredient? And then I was handed to other people. And then at the very end, they said, yes, of course it was fluoride. I said, why did I have such a tough time just to get a simple, answer? And they said, because people go crazy about fluoride. I said, but, the whole thing was so absurd. The big thing is children under a certain age, let's say the age of 5, cannot control their swallow reflex, or they have very poor control of their swallow reflex. So while we might say, oh, spit it out, right, they might swallow it. And I think that a parent has to be absolutely has to really think about buying fluoridated toothpaste for young children if they have young children.
And we're also hearing about topical applications now of fluoride, the dentists. And
right, this is very common. Right, this is very common. Actually, it was just a paper published. Someone just sent me a paper yesterday saying that basically they did some comparisons looking at a study of children who had their teeth coated with fluoride, and those who didn't, they didn't see any difference. But it was only one little paper. But here we have a situation, Jenny, where a parent can say yes or no.
Right.
To having that done.
Piece.
But
right.
That's right. And but parents, that's a choice there. But when it comes to fluoridation in water, most people don't even know their water's fluoridated.
Are water filters effective in getting fluoride out of our waters? I mean, there's so many different kinds of fluoride. I mean,
only the more
expensive water filters.
There are tons of different water filters. And this is the problem. To remove fluoride from the water, you have to remove all minerals, basically. Well, most of the filters, like distillation and reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis is pretty common because it's easy. It's not that expensive, but it's around $200 to get a unit under your kitchen sink, and you get your own little tap, and it gives you water without any minerals. But, there's a problem there. I mean, we need our minerals.
Exactly. But that's the kind of water filter we need to look for. That's what we needed to know. And then also to minimize...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's also an aluminum filter, an aluminum type of filtration system, because fluoride is a magnet, and aluminum and fluoride, they'll go to one another, and aluminum will capture the fluoride. But we had looked at some test results of such a filter in New Zealand last year, the beginning of this year, and the guy found there was a little excess of aluminum in his water, more than before he started it, and that has to be a concern. So maybe the best thing is that you can get spring water or bottled water with very low or no fluoride in it, but it still has the other minerals in it.
But then you get the hormone disruptors from the plastic. So
I know, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I know. So when you're saying that the fluoride is a hormone disruptor and it's used in pesticides, another way for us to reduce our exposure is to buy organic, especially grapes, wine, and raisins. I saw that on your website. So the pesticides used in those crops must especially contain the fluoride. And I just want to mention quickly about some of the accomplishments of the Fluoride Action Network. You've taken on and won battles with the American Dental Association, Dow Chemical, and others. You've convinced the EPA to phase out all food-based uses of fluoride in the U.S.
We did, Jenny, but I have to tell you, this was the biggest heartbreaker of my life. What happened was Dow Chemical, or Dow AgroSciences, they petitioned EPA to use sulfuryl fluoride as a food fumigant. And in 2001, we immediately responded, no, children are already overexposed because of the levels of dental fluorosis, and we can't afford any more fluoride exposure. Anyway, the long and short of it, EPA approved the use of this sulfuryl fluoride on all processed foods and on our grains and rice and a whole bunch of other things, but on all processed foods. And we worked with the Beyond Pesticides and the Environmental Working Group, and we wrote all kind of formal submissions. We were in mediation. Everything happened. And then we had a free lawyer, Perry Wallace, a pro bono lawyer who was brilliant to represent us. And then in 2011, EPA came out with, we agree with all of your objections, something they never said to anybody ever, and we are going to phase out sulfuryl fluoride. That was in early January 2011. We thought we won. Mm-hmm. But Dow AgroSciences, they came back with a vengeance. And the long and short of it, they got language into the Farm Bill of 2014. They did this in 2013. They got language to override EPA, and we lost it. And it just took us. We knew they were trying to do it, and then we would get our people to phone. This is why when listeners who have groups they really love, and those groups tell them, please contact your representatives, it's really important. Our people did contact their representatives, and then they pulled the language out of the Farm Bill, and then they put it back in, and then it was out. Just in December, it was out. We thought we won. But in early January, they put it back in and passed the bloody thing. We lost it. It was horrible.
That's got to be really discouraging. But I know you keep up the fight, and
yes.
Fluoride Action Network has helped many local groups and communities defeat water fluoridation programs to reduce their fluoride burden.
Yes.
And I just want to say, I know that's what you do. And again, get their newsletter and stay abreast of this problem, this issue. And I just want to say thank you again, Ellen, for all of your 20-plus years of work on all of our behalf. You're the managing director of the Fluoride Action Network. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Jenny, and thanks. Yes, we all are in this together.
Okay, and I'm going to let you go because I know you have an important appointment right now. But I'm going to stay on. All right. And I'm going to give out some links here so that you can.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's Fluoride Alert, FLUORIDE, alert.org, O-R-G. And it's important that you type in the O-R-G because when the Fluoride Action Network began making an impact on public awareness, the American Dental Association quickly purchased the domain fluoridealert.com, and that diverts you to the American Dental Association's fluoride website, pro-fluoride website. So click the Join Us link at the top of fluoridealert.org. and subscribe to FAN's newsletter with important updates on science and the good news from communities around the country and around the world. There's a lot of good news regarding fluoride. And Fluoride Action Network also has a TV link, which is a great way to catch up on and get more educated on fluoride and the issues surrounding it. There's full-length documentaries. There are short clips and interviews of leading figures in fluoride research, including dentists, toxicologists, and award-winning journalists, all seeking to shed light on the health concerns of fluoride and the history and politics of water fluoridation programs here in the U.S. And you can also take action to end fluoridation in your community. Ending water fluoridation is not a pipe dream at all. Since 1990, over 300 communities in the United States and Canada. This represents millions of people have rejected water fluoridation schemes. Learn 7 ways you can join this historic movement. The link is fluoridealert.org/take-action. So thank you again to Helen Connett, Managing Director of the Fluoride Action Network, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us I hope we have informed and inspired you in ways that improve your health and longevity. If you're looking for new ideas and the latest information on preventing cancer, please try to catch more of our podcasts on preventing cancer, green lifestyles, and sustainable and sustained living. And please share these interviews with your family and friends. You never know who you may be helping. I hope you will take the time to make the healthy changes you heard about today a priority in your life. Keep listening, and bye for now.